I am a very anxious person. I have been for most of my life. I think I first realized it when I failed first grade recess. So how does the nervous, science fiction loving math nerd get to lead a team of engineers looking at creating life-saving medicines? My story starts about 100 years ago. Very real-world Fiddler on the Roof. That's my grandfather up there in the upper left, my grandfather Herman, living in what's now Ukraine, was then Russia, had very little in terms of economic opportunity, religious freedom. So most of the family walked from where they were in southwestern Ukraine to Kyiv, took the train from Kyiv to Rotterdam, took the boat from Rotterdam to Ellis Island, from Ellis Island ended up in central New Jersey, where he ran a general store. They left Russia because they were facing a world of constraint. What they had was a lack of control and a lack of respect. And that's what brought them to New Jersey. And when they arrived, they had very little in terms of language, in terms of culture, in terms of money, but they knew what they were looking for, opportunity, a way to exert some influence over their lives to regain some aspects of control and respect. 2 generations later, as central New Jersey was booming, the Board of Education in Freehold decided it was time to produce some promotional brochures. That's me in 1967, sitting still for once. As the nervous kid, I was the foot tapper, the clock watcher, the disruptor, the annoying kid. And here they got me to sit still for a picture. A year later, they decided to shoot a promotional film showing off the new elementary school in town. And they asked a number of us to get on the swing set at recess and to put our whole effort into swinging in a staggered pattern that would make for a very nice film. I just didn't get it. I couldn't get the swinging right. I didn't go high enough. I kept blocking the other kids. I was asked to leave the movie set. I failed recess. And I was apoplectic about it. And I honestly think I had to come home from school that day, because what I had was a lack of respect. I couldn't swing correctly, and I had very little control over it. And these aspects of where do I have control and how do I gain respect have driven both my view of my anxiety and also how I work very hard to tame it and temper it. It is also driven very much by a sense of otherness. You look at me and say, all right, be serious, how other are you? You're a cis, white, straight male from an upper middle class family in central New Jersey. You're not really that other. But let's go back. I was raised Jewish at a time when you took off for holidays in the middle of the week and then came back to school eating weird foods or not eating certain foods. That was otherness. I love science fiction. I read the entire elementary school science fiction library 4 times over because they were the only books that I liked. I went on to discover music. I hung out with the theater kids, the drama kids, before those were mainstreamed by shows like School of Rock and Glee. I was a band nerd. I discovered computer science. Off I went to Princeton University, where I met preppies. I met trust fund kids. I met an avalanche of 200 years of tradition that I knew nothing about. I didn't have the language, I didn't have the understanding to really fit in socially. But I was a computer science major. So I went to the computer center because that's where the computers were. Before we carried the computer center around in our pockets, you had this somewhat geographically undesirable major where you had to go to a special place in campus with the other nerds to go study computer science. It drove another sense of otherness. And along the way, I began to figure out how is it I look at what I do, where I can have control, where I can gain respect for what I do, and where do I have to accommodate the language? Where do I have to better understand what I am doing and how I do it? And this sense of otherness has continued even in my professional career. Again, it's very subtle. It's about really understanding the context. But as a computer scientist working for a life sciences company, I am surrounded by real science. Chemists, biologists, doctors, clinicians, statistical scientists, and I'm the computer scientist. For a long time, I had trouble thinking about how we talk about technology in support of healthcare. What we do is healthcare. We make people better. Technology is just a tool there. And part of my understanding my otherness in a professional context was to be able to become comfortable with that and to tell its story. And finally, I'm a bass player, and let's be honest, in the band, the bass player is always the other. Stand over there next to the drummer, you only have 4 strings, and please don't take a solo because everyone will go to the bathroom. So it is about how do I gain control and respect? And how is it I understand both my own constraints, those that are provided to me, again, like my grandparents in Russia, but also those where I'm lacking an understanding of the social cues. Some of that I saw at Princeton, and some of that I have definitely seen in my professional career. So I'll tell a story. Early on in my technology career, I was approached by a customer at a very large bank. Hal, I need you to go develop a design for a foreign exchange trading floor. It's going to be big, it's going to be critical to the bank, it's absolutely important. You're the only one who can do it, and it's going to get a lot of visibility. Control and respect, I was drooling at this opportunity. I had to go do it. So I did it. I put my name on it, worked very hard at it, gave it to the customer. He then took it and used it to create a bit of a political power play against a few other executives, one of whom did not take so kindly to that. Called my boss's boss. I don't know who this Stern guy is, but he's creating a problem, you should get rid of him. And here I am with a new mortgage, a new family, in a new city in New Jersey, mildly terrified, because I did not pick up on the social cues. Fortunately, the technology company I worked for at the time truly embraced disruption. It was okay for me to be the chatterbox and the annoying kid, for me to generate ideas they hadn't seen before, because that's where technical innovation came from. And my boss and my boss's boss stepped in on my behalf. We made some apologies. We smoothed things over. We continued to keep that bank as a customer. I continued to keep my job. But I learned something absolutely critical along the way. You need to understand not just your own constraints, but those imposed on you. Because if you have that mismatch, you inevitably run into this conflict that leads to issues of where you have control, where you exercise control, and how you gain respect. So, of course, I'm a math nerd. I have to make a graph to explain this. And I think of this along 2 dimensions. Is my control where I have authority and autonomy? Am I empowered? Or am I being directed? Is someone else telling me what to do? And this shows up in weird ways for me. I don't like traffic. I don't like long lines. I don't like bad drivers. You know, it's a trend here. It's not a good time to live in New Jersey if those are issues that you have. But those are all things, they're external forces that are out of my control, but they fuel my anxiety. Am I respected? Am I adored or am I disrespected? The other dimension. And you look at this, that's really easy. You want to go live in the upper right. If you're familiar with any sort of statistical science, upper right is good, lower left is bad. You don't want to be in either of the corners. Well, the upper right here, yes, I'm empowered and people love me. The problem with that is you run into groupthink. You have no healthy tension in the system. You never try anything new because you're doing great and everybody likes you. And you end up stagnating. The other extreme, the opposite corner, is nobody likes you. We really don't understand why you're here. This, sadly, is frequently a case when you have new employees coming into your company or new people entering your group. And the challenge here is figure out why. What contextual clues are you missing? What language don't you have? Where are the points of respect not honored bidirectionally so you're ending up in that corner case? But again, they are the corner cases. The bulk of it is this valley through the middle, which is the passive-aggressive zone. And we love to talk about organizations or people being passive-aggressive. What that means is that we disagree on who's in control and who gets credit, who has the respect. I love you, I just don't want you doing that project because I want to do it. That project's really, really great. I'm going to put it on my slides and take credit for it. And you see this all the time. Inevitably, in any sort of organization, if people have anxiety, organizations can have anxiety as well. Whether that's your family, your friends, your band, your school, your workplace. You have to look out for what it means to be in that passive-aggressive zone. So, how do you get out? How do you find your way out? I believe it strongly draws on your creativity. Creativity allows you to have ideas, to formulate them, and to use them to tell your story where you regain control. That's what creative control is. You're formulating your own ideas. So I have to tell a bit of a story now. For me, creativity is about writing. I discovered that I can write about technical things fairly well, and it has allowed me to tell stories about technologies that people otherwise wouldn't think had a place to play on Wall Street, in manufacturing, in telephone companies, and in life sciences companies. It's also about playing music, something that I had done earlier, and again, I picked up in the last couple of years and have really found a wonderful outlet, a way to go think about doing new things in new ways. It also, for me, is about collecting. And I have been a collector for about as long as I can remember. Collecting allows you to take a random assortment of things and impose order on them. You're creating control. So if you come into my office, you will see a collection of baseballs, sports cards, concert posters, ticket stubs, golf balls, and ancient coins, and quite honestly, an awful lot of other crap. But it's not crap to me because I put control on it, I created order, and as Cory Doctorow said in his first short story, I create a story out of it. Now, what does Bob Cousy have to do with this? So when my parents cleaned out my childhood room, they gave me a box of things that they thought I might like. Fortunately, in that box was a briefcase. Inside the briefcase was every baseball card I had saved up from my pre-tween years. So excited. Opened up. Inside, of course, is a shoebox if you don't have a baseball card collection unless it has lived inside of a shoebox. So there in my old Buster Brown shoebox is a collection of these weird basketball cards. And at that point, I began talking to my cousins to build the backstory. Where did these come from? Well, I remembered, okay, we used to get baseball cards and other sports cards from our grandfather's general store. The story here is that probably the top salesman had come to him in 1957, the first year they made basketball cards, offered him a box of cards. He had a certain otherness. Basketball wasn't on TV. It wasn't a big sport. He didn't know this sport. The kids wanted baseball cards. The basketball cards went in a box behind the counter, where they stayed for 15 years. Me being the youngest cousin, when it came time for us to get our treats from our grandfather, I, of course, got what nobody else wanted. I got the basketball cards. So here it was, my grandfather's not understanding how basketball was this emerging American icon. My cousins deciding, well, you're the youngest, you get what's left over. My own not understanding that Bob Cousy is one of the patron saints of the twin Boston religions of basketball and hockey, until finally he surfaced up in a pile of things from my childhood. And now he is the center of one of those collections. It tells a story that goes all the way back to my grandfather leaving Russia 100 years ago. And the challenge for us in this is to make things very, very simple. That is what we have to do. To find our way out of this anxiety, you want to find the simplest story you can. In the time of Charles Mingus, the early bebop jazz artists, they would take the chord changes from an existing song and drop a new melody over on top of it. What you see is a lot of the bebop songs are what are called contrafacts. They're existing songs that the other musicians already knew. They didn't have to learn something else new. They were able to simply layer their creativity on top. Of course, I have another graph. The challenge you face then in dealing with this force of how do I balance my creativity against those external forces challenging my control and my respect is you're the marble in the middle of that saddle point. You don't want it to roll off. You want to understand what's pulling you up or pulling you down and be able to tell your story so you sit gracefully in the middle. You're able to exert some control. You're able to take your story, your narrative, your collection of things that you do and play it forward. For me, a lot of this otherness came to light, and I truly understood it about 12 years ago on a trip visiting our daughter in Israel. I was living there for a year. And to bring things full circle, I had lunch probably every other day at this particular falafel spot. I don't know the guy's name. I referred to him as the asthmatic falafel guy, because that's how we got to know each other. We both had asthma. We had both failed recess at one point or another. But what I found is that I didn't have to explain myself. He knew I was there because it was the week before Hanukkah. We knew what the blue and white decorations were about. He understood the fried, strange foods that were seasonal at that time. I had zero context to provide. I was instantly at home. And it was a different feeling for me. It was the first time I did not feel other. And so my insistence on inclusivity, the way out of this conflict of constraints, the things that lead to conflict around control and respect, is really about inclusivity. Not just how you provide it to others, but also how you find it for yourself. How is it that you go and build your story? How is it that you go and find the things that are blockers, that keep your ideas from getting traction, and remove them? And when we talk in a corporate setting about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is about exactly this, about removing the roadblocks so people's ideas, people's creative output has a place to go. And I will argue that the antidote to otherness and anxiety is really your measure of culture. How do ideas disperse over time? How do they change? How are they adopted? How do they take root and fly? If you have a good culture, and again, that culture could be as small as your family or your circle of friends or your band. It could be as big as a 100,000 person company in every country of the world. If your ideas are given the light of day, if they have a chance to be heard, to be seen, to be adopted, then you have inclusion. And I believe you have a very, very strong culture. Why do our favorite bands break up? Creative differences. The ideas aren't spreading. But as Kevin Kelly, one of the first editors of Wired magazine, said, ideas are networks. People want to join them. Of course we do. That's why we love memes. It's why we go to TED Talks. And thank you for listening to mine.